Whilomville Stories Part 5, making an Orator, Stephen Crane short stories. Making Orator from Whilomville Stories, Stephen Crane. In the school at Whilomville, it was the habit when children had progressed to a certain class to have them devote Friday afternoon to what was called elocution. This was in the piteously ignorant belief that orators were thus made by the process of school law. Unfortunate boys and girls were dragged up to address their fellow scholars in the literature of the mid-century, probably the children who were most capable of expressing themselves, the children who were most sensitive to the power of speech, suffered the most wrong. Little blockheads who could learn 8 lines of conventional poetry and could get up and spin it rapidly at their classmates did not undergo a single pang. The plan operated mainly to agonize many children permanently against the rising to speak their thought to fellow creatures. Jimmy Trescott had an idea that by exhibition of undue ignorance he could escape from being promoted into the first class room, which exacted such penalty from its inmates. He preferred to dwell in a less classic shade rather than venture into a domain where he was obliged to perform a certain duty which struck him as being worse than death. However, willy-nilly, he was somehow sent ahead into the place of torture. Every Friday, at least 10 of the little children had to mount the stage beside the teacher's desk and babble something which none of them understood. This was to make them orators. If it had been ordered that they should croak like frogs, it would have advanced most of them just as forward oratory. Alphabetically, Jimmy Trescott was near the end of the list of victims, but his time was nonetheless inevitable. Tanner Timmons Trescott. He saw his downfall approaching. He was passive to the teacher while she drove into his mind the incomprehensible lines of the charge of the Light Brigade, half a league, half a league, half a league onward. He had no conception of a league. If in the ordinary course of life somebody had told him that he was half a league from home, he might have been frightened that half a league was 50 miles. But he had struggled manfully with the Valley of Death and a mystic 600, who were performing something there which was very fine. He had been told he learned all the verses, but as his own Friday afternoon approached, he was moved to make known to his family that dreadful disease was upon him, and was likely at any time to prevent him from going to his beloved school. On the great Friday, when the children of his initials were to speak their pieces, Dr. Trescott was away from home, and the mother of the boy was alarmed beyond measure at Jimmy's curious illness, which caused him to lie on the rug in front of the fire and groan cavernously. She bathed his feet in hot mustard water until they were lobster red. She also placed a mustard plaster on his chest. He announced that these remedies did him no good at all. No good at all. With an air of martyrdom, he endured a perfect downpour of motherly attention all that day. Thus the first Friday was passed in safety. With singular patience, he sat before the fire in the dining room and looked at picture books, only complaining of pain when he suspected his mother was thinking that he was getting better. The next day, being Saturday and a holiday, he was miraculously delivered from arms of disease and went forth to play, a blatantly healthy boy. He had no further attack until Thursday night of the next week, when he announced that he felt very, very poorly. The mother was already chronically alarmed over the condition of her son, but Dr. Trescott asked him questions which denoted some incredulity. On the third Friday, Jimmy was dropped at the door of the school from the doctor's buggy. The other children, notably those who had already passed over the mountain of distress, looked at him with glee, seeing in him another lamb brought to butchery. Seated at his desk in the schoolroom, Jimmy sometimes remembered with dreadful distinctness every line of the charge of the Light Brigade, and at other times his mind was utterly empty of it. Geography, arithmetic, and spelling, usually great tasks, rolled off him. His mind was dwelling with terror upon the time when his name should be called, and he was obliged to go up to the platform, turn, bow, and recite his message to his fellow men. Desperate expedients for delay came to him. If he could have engaged the service of a real pain, he would have been glad, but steadily, inexorably, the minutes marched on toward his great crisis, and all his plans for escape blended into a mere panic fear. The maples outside were defeating the weakening rays of the afternoon sun, and in the shadowed schoolroom had come a stillness, in which, nevertheless, one could feel the complacence of the little pupils who had already passed through the flames. They were calmly prepared to recognize as a spectacle the torture of others.